like to introduce Allison, our Roaring Brook principal, and her team.
Good evening. I'm Allison Porcelli. I'm the interim principal of Roaring Brook Elementary School. And I'm very proud to be amongst this group of very dedicated and professional teachers tonight who represent the Roaring Brook faculty very well. There's a real energy around learning at Roaring Brook with adults, with the kids, and we're very excited to share that learning with you tonight. So we will be talking to you about social-emotional learning and innovative instruction and how they tie together. And so before we do that, I want to give just a brief snapshot of Roaring Brook learning in the past. In 2015-2016 school year, Roaring Brook faculty studied growth mindset and looked at the difference between a growth and a fixed mindset, and really looked at the language that they were using with kids and how their language can promote a growth mindset, and also the dispositional learning that the dispositions that they want to encourage, such as persistence and perseverance. And that learning, even though it was a few school years ago, is very much alive in the school today. And then last year, like many of the other schools, and you've heard their presentations, Roaring Brook also studied active learning, project-based learning, and the innovative spaces. Which brings us to our learning this year, which, as I mentioned, is innovative and social-emotional learning. On opening day of school this year, Dr. Ackerman showed us all, you remember, the video of the 21st century learners and what our world will look like in, I think it was 2025. And one of the things that stood out to us from that video was that many of the jobs don't even exist yet. But what we do know is that it's very important for us to teach our students what it means to be human beings. And skills like empathy and collaboration and problem solving and creativity are the skills that we feel are really important. So earlier in the school year, I had an aha moment with one of the teachers. I was visiting the makerspace, and it's we've come to joke that it's a great problem that we have, that it's hard for teachers to get in there, so they had to create a whole fancy schedule to organize the time. But so I was in there, and a teacher was very excited about a project-based learning unit that she had planned, and the kids set off, and they had all these beautiful materials, and they were in their groups and ready to work. And of course, what starts to happen is the kids are arguing over the materials, and they're disagreeing over who's going to do which part of the project. And the teacher and I stood back and we looked, and we could have taken that moment and felt a little frustrated, but rather than seeing it as a roadblock, we saw it as a real opportunity. And we thought, you know what, this is a really, really great, authentic place to tie these two initiatives together. Innovative and social-emotional learning. So that's what we're going to present to you tonight. We have three groups of teachers who are going to be talking about innovative and social-emotional learning around Roaring Brook across different grade levels and different spaces. So Stephanie Candelaft and Andrea Shaver are our kindergarten teachers, and they'll be talking about how they use play to teach into social-emotional learning. And play is young children's first experience with the design process. It naturally happens inherently as kids are building with blocks. They'll naturally ask the question, wait, how can I make this block structure the biggest, tallest structure I can make? And as they're trying to build it, they'll try it one way, try another way. And eventually they'll come to realize after it falls down a number of times that they have to build a sturdy base first before they can stack. Otherwise it won't work. And there's a lot of social-emotional learning that goes into that. So Andrea and Stephanie will be talking to us about that. Bracken Feldman, our art teacher, and Susan Diskin, one of our second grade teachers, will be talking about a collaborative project-based learning unit in the content area, social studies, that they worked on in the makerspace, and some of the social-emotional learning skills that they taught into. And then Olga Chusa is here from fourth grade, and she will be talking to us about how she and her students utilized the design process to take on some social action around our school, and they formed some empathy clubs. So I will turn it over to the teachers because they are the star of this presentation.
So I think it would be helpful to start by defining what is social-emotional learning. Social-emotional learning is teaching children the skills necessary to self-regulate their own emotions and to interact positively both with peers and adults. Without first teaching social-emotional skills, children will not be able to successfully engage in innovative teaching practices such as those in the makerspace. Keep in mind that kindergartners are brand new people, some of whom have only been on the planet for 4 years when they come to us at Roaring Brook. In order for these young people to be able to fully access our rigorous academic curriculum, they need to be taught social-emotional skills. When children know how to communicate and collaborate respectfully with one another, they're able to plan, compromise, and implement their ideas. Next slide. At Roaring Brook, our school motto, which is the acronym PRIDE, incorporates aspects of social-emotional learning. During center time, we provide the children with a variety of materials so that they can envision, plan, and implement their own ideas. To stock our classroom makerspace, the children brought in recycled materials and organized those materials, as you can see in the center photo. It is only when we give students the opportunity to engage in open-ended exploration that they're able to transfer and apply the social-emotional skills that they have learned throughout the day. One only needs to observe what occurs in a typical day in the block area or the makerspace to witness the incredible brainstorming, planning, negotiating, collaborating, problem-solving, and implementation of plans that kindergartners are capable of.
In order for students to be involved in innovative and collaborative learning, students first need to learn how to be active participants of a group, make connections to others, perspective take, and share their thinking with others. Through giving children these opportunities to explore, act on their curiosity, and use their imaginations, we are allowing them to develop the foundational skills for creative thinking, problem solving, risk-taking, and innovative thinking. One activity that we incorporate into our daily schedule to build the skills necessary for this type of learning is called a community circle. This is a time and place where students are engaged in meaningful and open-ended social and academic conversations where they can practice ways to express their thoughts, opinions, and ideas openly and honestly. They also learn how to ask questions to gather more information and respectfully disagree with others. These are skills that are then transferred and applied during center-based play. As we learned from George McCloskey during our staff development day, the prefrontal cortex is where executive functioning is all developed. So we need to provide our children with these opportunities to develop that prefrontal cortex in order to teach them strategies to become more independent thinkers. At the kindergarten level, we work with students to create an environment where they're constantly navigating socially in order to support the meaningful inquiry and exploration that occurs across the day. So when students are given the opportunity to work together, they begin to apply these self-awareness skills to collaborative learning through planning and assigning roles and creating products together. So here we have students that are using materials from Reader's Workshop during center play as they recreate some of their emergent storybooks. Having a flexible mindset during these activities is extremely important as students negotiate their roles and turn-taking. There's a lot of hidden curriculum going on here, as the students are remembering what good storytellers do and giving each other helpful feedback on ways to act out the stories. These are also skills that are transferred and applied when working through academic challenges and social challenges throughout the day. So here we have a video that demonstrates the way students work together to create a group plan, build their structures according to the plan, and participate in some compromising and problem-solving skills along the way. This video really demonstrates the way that we're building the foundational skills for students to work collaboratively through divergent thinking throughout the day as they're faced with challenges in both social, emotional scenarios and when academic challenges arise as well.
We're gonna put the blocks like this and like that. Can I do that?
So So Ava and Alexa, what did you do first here?
We draw what we want to do, and now we're gonna build what we want to do.
So did you work together?
Yeah, we're gonna attach everything together so we can. Yeah, because we're gonna use a little bit of her idea and a little bit of my idea.
Oh, did you guys compromise on that?
Yes.
Oh, so I see that you both drew on each side of the planning page.
Yeah.
So what are your next steps?
We're going to build we're going to build a tower and then put something around it. Yeah.
A tower with something around it? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to check back in with you guys in a little bit. So as you can see, they're working on their compromising skills, and these are skills that will truly set them up to be successful when they get into areas like the makerspace in our building, and we go into next week when we work with the coding with the B-bots. These are definitely skills that set that foundation. So these are slides that are indicative of how fostering this growth mindset will enable our students to work cooperatively and problem solve, and they're demonstrating resilience and perseverance through challenging tasks. So this next slide shows how our students became very interested in the Rockefeller tree lighting this year. So we read some books about New York City and discussed the challenges that would go into bringing this such a large tree into the middle of such a busy, crowded city. We showed the video of the tree going through, and the students were amazed and talked about how there's so many people there and the streets are so narrow. So they really worked hard to recreate this event in our block area. So through drafting, trial and error, several discussions, and rebuilding, we successfully brought the tree into the center of the busy and crowded city after they drew warning signs and shut down streets. And we were able to do it without cutting the tree in half, which was the original idea for the plan.
When we received new cubbies this year, the children were thrilled when we asked the custodian to save the giant boxes they came in. They brainstormed ideas about what to create with the box, voted on which idea to implement, made plans, and ended up creating the rabbit burrow you see here on the top left. Each day in the dramatic play area, the children need to decide on a theme and assign roles and come up with solutions when someone does not want to be the babysitter again. Psychologist Lev Vygotsky stated that learning is based on social construction through collaboration with others. This social construction can only take place within the scaffolding of direct teaching of social-emotional skills. The first video you see on the left was taken in our classroom makerspace during center time. In it, you'll see an example of a kindergartner who demonstrates perseverance.
Right, Scott, what are you going to do?
Once I bring this home, I can drop my Mario figure straight through this top hole, and it will come flying down and come out right here and land in here.
So is that what you were planning on making when you first started working here?
Yes.
Did you have to change your design while you were working?
No. I kept trying and trying until it worked.
So this child worked on his project for over an hour. At one point, he realized he was unable to complete one part of his project design. This was an opportunity for me to remind him that sometimes we need to enlist the help of others, which he did. He asked if anyone was an expert on cutting out squares, and several children offered to be that expert. In the second video, you'll see a child who worked on a self-initiated project for 2 days in our classroom makerspace.
It's going good right now again.
It's going good?
Good again. But it's hard putting B2 into the A card. I did it that time, but today it worked. Where's all the tape?
Why do you think it worked last time but not this time?
Because I don't know.
Is there something different about the materials you're using?
Okay. No. It's not too now the head's falling off.
He demonstrated demonstrated resilience and perseverance, and as you heard, I helped him practice reflecting on the progress of his project when I asked him why he thought he was able to attach the tubes a previous day, but not that particular day. So as you can see, all of this social emotional growth is very hard work.
It's exhausting.
So this evening, we're going to share with you a project that we have been doing together collaboratively in the makerspace. The work we've been doing was driven by the excitement around the makerspace, as well as the work we've been doing to nurture a safe environment where students demonstrate a growth mindset, empathy, respect, intentional kindness through authentic learning.
Allison. Sorry. I was so engaged by what you were saying.
We started by having a conversation about how the makerspace can guide the social emotional work going on in the classroom. During a planning session, we started the conversation by looking at the second grade curriculum. And then I observed that the students during a social studies lesson on different types of communities. With support from Sue, I developed a lesson plan based around the students creating Thanksgiving Day parade floats to travel through downtown Chappaqua.
Here's an example.
Here's an example, yep, and then we're just going to play a little bit of an example for you as well.
Go ahead, Katie.
Let it start. Okay.
So in the classroom, the children have been studying their suburban community in Chappaqua, as well as mapping skills. As stated in our first slide, the mission presented to them was to design a float for the parade. So first we start with the development and the planning stage, where we sat one morning, we put the children into small groups. We had 5 different groups of children, and we really looked at who they were and their personalities and their strengths. And the challenge was presented to them. And before we even got to making our bebots, we talked about designs. So the children had to go through the first process of designing their ideas for a parade. So they had to talk to each other and share their different ideas and think about what their parade might look like. Some people wanted a football stadium on the top of their float. Others wanted a family celebrating Thanksgiving. Some children wanted a Thanksgiving feast scene. So after they were introduced to the bebots and they sat down, and you can see the last slide, the boy there, he's practicing program coding the bebot to go in different directions. Then they had to storm the makerspace to find different supplies that they thought that they could use to make their bebot parade float. So then after that, the children got busy working on making their float. They had to do some negotiations, had to make some negotiations along the way, and that's what Allison was referring to, the observations that we made about the children having to navigate. They worked through this over 3 different sessions.
So in the collaboration process, we involved Diane Wendell and Chris Idem to help collaborate with their expertise in, bringing in how we're coding the bebots and traveling them along the mats. Diane also incorporated going through the village of downtown Chappaqua so that the kids could use Google Earth to find the facades of the storefronts and sketch out the facades to take them down to the bebot mats so that the kids could create their own parade routes for the floats to travel through.
And here are some pictures of the children after they made their storefront pictures. They were taped down, and they had to figure out where that they wanted to place them. So they had to think about, where was Bell School in relationship to like Starbucks or the rec center in order to program their bebots. So you can see them there trying out some of their little floats on their mats.
During this process, the students also discovered that the bebot couldn't quite tow the weight that they were thinking it could. And we had to make some quick adjustments. The students would not only work with their groups, talking about the different ideas, but they would wander around the classroom to do a little gallery walk to see what their classmates had going on. And each project was dramatically different. And students would go back and make adaptations to their projects to help the bebop be towed, help their parade float be towed by the bebop. This is just a little lead up to the video. Devin, one of the students, is talking about her reflection at the end of the process. So we're just gonna play right here.
I thought our bebop float was going to go on top of the helmet, and Callie also thought that. And then we saw other people towing their bebop, so we thought we should do that too.
So as we were working through our sessions, we noticed that we needed to do more teaching into giving positive feedback to the students. And so we did hear a lot of really positive feedback after we had worked on giving feedback in the classroom in different activities, cooperative learning, working with reading partners or writing partners. The children really got to be much more proficient at providing feedback to the friends that they were in groups with. And we were able to observe kids saying things like, I like your idea. Have you thought about, I think we should try this. So the kids were using the language that we had developed in the classroom. These are two charts here. One is providing feedback to your partners in a very positive, respectful manner. And the other chart is talking about kindness and what kindness looks like to my second graders.
So this video will just show a brief little glimpse of the final product, and some students, I believe, are talking about how they revised and went through the process. It might be hard to hear them because there's noise going on. Nice. So let's So I have one question for this group.
The mat is...
Yeah, it's just the mat, but it is moving, right, Ferris?
Mm-hmm. And you were also pushing it.
So I have one question.
They were very into making their floats very big, and then they realized big didn't make it better. And then there was a group of 4 that realized that they could hook up their float to their bebop, and all of a sudden everybody wanted to do that, but then they really need to customize their float, so it actually did pull the float. Because they're pretty heavy floats, but the kids were able to manage to figure out how to make their floats actually go through the parade route. They were very successful.
So when Sue and I originally thought about this project, we borrowed some bebop helmets. And they're just simple things, and we just kept thinking, well, the kids will just build on top of this, and this will become their float, and it will drive. And what really ignited Sue and I in our exciting process here was that the kids explored with the bebop by looking to see that there's a tow hitch, and started revising and coming up with new ideas and new concepts. And you can see the student in the middle, Serena, her group just did it right on top of the helmet. And they kept looking around, they're like, well, ours moves so easily, and just seeing that helped to have the kids have the conversations about how things can be light and move around and easily on the mats.
So collaborating together, we learned a lot about how children work well together and providing feedback. That we're going to move on to another project where the children are going to be making marionette animal puppets, because we're presently in a nonfiction reading and writing unit. So that's going to be our next collaborative project.
Good evening, everyone. As you've been hearing from our teachers, emotions matter. Before any real learning can occur, children need to feel safe, they need to feel calm, they need to feel comfortable enough to take risks. And that's why social emotional learning, I believe, is just as important as academic skills. And I'd like to thank Ellen and Allison for supporting us in that important movement and that work we're doing here tonight. So last year, my students in 4th grade began reading some articles about bullying in the beginning of the year. They were quite shocked about what they read, and they decided to take some action to raise awareness against bullying. And that became the Choose Kindness campaign. We were very fortunate to have Mr. Phil Imperio, a parent volunteer who's here tonight, donate time and his expertise to work with the children who gave up their recess one day during the cycle. Which, you know, a lot of kids don't like to give up recess, but they volunteered. We had about half of the class doing that. And some of the things that children worked on was creating a mural, posters, school-wide displays showing acts of kindness. They created public service announcements that were presented on the morning announcements at school. They did some role-playing and videos showing acts of kindness. They even wrote a song together, which was performed at the school assembly. So that led to what's happening this year. Once again, my students read some articles about bullying. Again, they wanted to take some action. It was their decision. They wanted to raise awareness. This year, they decided, let's promote the idea of empathy. We have 100% of the class participating this year. They all volunteered. So now we're doing it in class once a week. Usually Friday afternoons, the last hour of the day, is a good time for us to be doing that. And then we brainstormed some ideas. What can we do? How can we get the word out and raise awareness? They said, let's make posters. Let's do some slideshows. We have children creating a newsletter, writing articles about what would you do if you were in that situation. And I have groups of children who are now teachers. They call themselves the empathizers. They created and taught lessons to children in younger grades. Here's a picture of children in kindergarten, teaching them about what empathy is. The next steps are planned to create public service announcements again that will be played on morning announcements at school. So the children needed to study and learn what empathy is, what it looks like, what it sounds like. They realized that empathy is a quality that we are all born with. Empathy can be developed, cultivated, and strengthened. Empathy leads to happier, healthier, and more successful lives. Why wouldn't you practice empathy? You'll be more popular, you'll be well-liked, you'll have better relationships, you'll get along well with other people. We used research from the Yale Ruler program. We've been doing some lessons where the children have been learning that people who learn how to identify and manage their feelings feel better, and they deal with stressful situations better. They create stronger relationships with other people, and they perform better in school. And I've seen that happen over and over again. One of the things that the children are learning about this year, which they'll be teaching the younger grades, is that we can use something that we call a mood meter to help us think about the different types of feelings we have. For example, our feelings can be classified into categories: pleasant, unpleasant, high energy, low energy. An example, high energy, pleasant feeling would be excited. A pleasant, low energy feeling would be content, calm, relaxed. That's what we aim to be in most of the time. Unpleasant feelings, angry, are high energy. Unpleasant, low energy feelings, things like being sad, blue, feeling down. Children are working on writing their feelings. They've created feelings journals. And some of the questions we ask them to think about in writing their journals: how are you feeling today? Where does that fall on the mood meter? And think about what is causing you to feel that way. And what goal do you have for yourself? Where do you want to be? What emotion are you hoping to reach for this day? And what strategy can you use to achieve that goal? Children are learning how to describe their emotions using very specific feelings vocabulary words. They're learning words like anxious, ecstatic, content, irritated. They're also learning how to describe the feelings of other people by looking at their faces closely, looking at real people's faces, looking at photographs, looking at illustrations of faces in the characters of the books that we're reading, helping us understand the characters by looking at their faces. Being able to identify our own emotions allows us to build empathy by taking another person's perspective. You can't feel what another person is feeling until you're able to identify your own feelings. We've also been working on practicing active listening, which involves listening to others very carefully without judgment, with paraphrasing what they've said, and with asking clarifying questions. That's a way of being an empathetic listener. In reading, children are putting themselves into their characters' places to deepen their understanding and make higher level interpretations of the text. We're also going to be learning how we can use strategies to manage our feelings. We've been working with strategies such as mindful breathing. We do that every day when the kids come back from recess. It calms them down, it gets them ready for learning, it focuses their attention, it makes them feel relaxed but at the same time alert. Children have also been learning that mindful breathing strengthens self-regulation, it strengthens executive function, and it helps them make wise choices. Another strategy that the children are learning to manage their feelings is self-talk. I will do my best, even though it's hard, even though it's tricky, I'm not going to give up. So these are all phrases that a person with a growth mindset would be using. They're writing about their feelings in their journal to manage their feelings. Sometimes they just need to take a walk or take a movement break. Sometimes they need to talk to a friend. So the next steps that we're planning are to think about how can we take the work that we've been doing in the school and in the classroom and extend that into the community and beyond. How can we think about performing acts of kindness for groups of people that might be in need in our community and even beyond our community. And we're thinking about how we can continue to brainstorm some ideas. What can we do? What are we concerned about? What actions can we take? And then we'll decide on one of those causes and continue with our work into the wider world. Thank you.
So before we go to questions, hopefully you were able to hear the level of responsive teaching that's going on at Roaring Brook, the collaboration amongst the colleagues, and how joyful the learning is. So we invite you to come and visit us and come see what we're doing around this area and any other area. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I'd like to open up to board members if you have questions.
I'm going to start with you, Stephanie. Just that's easy. How do you feel your work with kindergartners has changed over the years in terms of the social emotional teaching and explicit teaching as opposed to what you just did naturally?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Well, we're very fortunate here in Chappaqua to be a fully inclusive district, because when you have children with special needs in your class, and I often do, and I work with my co-teacher, Faye D'Ambrosio, and sometimes we even have children with severe special needs from the inclusive service model. It provides opportunities for the children to very quickly learn how to modify their approach with others depending on that person's individual needs. So to that point, this year I even have a child who's nonverbal. She's not special needs, but she is a selective mute, actually. And after 23 years of teaching, this is the first time I've ever had that experience. So a good example of how the children regulate their approach to interacting with other children is I was trying to encourage her to talk. So I said, this is way at the beginning of the year, and I said, oh, who made your snack for you today? And she looked at me and, of course, didn't say anything. And another child, thinking that I needed some help, came over and said to her, okay, pretend this is your mother and this is your babysitter. Which one made your snack? So the way that the children interact with each other in a fully inclusive setting is so beautiful, and I would welcome anyone to come visit because they really take care of each other. And the way things have changed recently is with more children spending more time in front of a screen, there's less interaction with each other, whether it's siblings, even other adults, and so forth. So we quickly teach the children, obviously, the very simple niceties like saying thank you to someone who holds a door for you. And also, like Olga said, reading each other's faces and asking each other why, when something goes wrong. Why did you write on my paper? And sometimes that can diffuse a situation really quickly. So I think that's the way it's evolved. And as, like I said, as students with different needs come into the classroom, it provides an opportunity for the children to learn varying strategies.
I would, to expand on that too, in terms of the technology that's at a younger level, more so than it used to be even 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. When they progress from you, so it's great to see that you're still, making sure that they have those one-on-one interactions. And how do you see a difference then moving on, like to 2nd grade or 4th grade, that maybe generationally that you have to spend more time on things like this, like empathy and then working together because of so much of the technology? And have you had to sort of redouble your efforts to get them to interact with each other?
Yes, it's very true. Where before we would talk about we need to be kind to someone, show them respect, we really need to do a lot of modeling now, a lot of discussion around it. We use a lot of literature. There's a lot of wonderful literature, and we have all built our libraries in the last probably 4 years where we have a lot of books that talk about having a growth mindset and what kindness looks like and how you can have a superpower, and your superpower can be that you're very understanding and you're willing to go and help someone out instead of you see them drop their lunch tray and just walk away. They now know, let me stop and help that friend. But there's a great deal of conversation and role modeling and doing different scenarios where the kids are role modeling and acting out different situations.
And I meant to mention that regarding the technology, I really wasn't interested in the children spending time in the classroom with headphones on looking at a computer when we used to have the desktops. So a shout out to the Chappaqua School Foundation. They provided, I wrote a grant, and they provided the kindergarten at Roaring Brook with a smart table, which the children have to work collaboratively in order to complete games on it, to the point where if you want to change a game, all 4 members of the team have to agree, and each person has to wait for the icon to come in their corner before it can be turned to another game. And so that's such a great example of how, with a little bit of, tweaking and just looking at things through a different lens, that you can make it work. So they're still having the experience with technology, but they're working in a collaborative way.
And they look like they're having so much fun working together. Really, it's fantastic.
I'm curious, with the more focused efforts on collaboration, which is great, by the way, and also on the social-emotional learning. I'm just wondering to what extent you think we'll see a change in just behavior, just social behavior, for instance, in middle school, because kids start to get cliquey, sometimes, not necessarily bullying, but sometimes you see kids treating each other a little bit more unkindly, a little more often towards middle school. Then they get into cliques and they exclude people. And that sort of thing has happened over generations. And I'm just wondering, we always had, in this district, we always had programs to teach kindness and gratitude. I remember years ago, we had the words of the month. There was always a lot of effort. It looks like this is more curriculum-based now, more focused. Maybe it was curriculum-based before. You could certainly correct me. This just seems to be more focused and perhaps deeper. Plus, with the collaboration, really forcing kids to, not forcing, but teaching them to work together. And for instance, going out of their groups to see what other groups are doing. I'm just wondering to what extent you think this will change behavior, so that will we have a different specimen of 9th graders, for instance, than we have.
Well, I actually have an anecdote that addresses your point specifically. my sons graduated from Greeley, and when one of them was at Seven Bridges, I accompanied him on a school trip. And so here we are on this big, beautiful bus waiting to go, and there was clearly a special needs child. It seemed as if he was on the spectrum. And he was on the bus, and he had a one-to-one aide, and I remember thinking, oh boy, this poor kid in middle school, I can't imagine how he navigates through the day with kids being the way kids they are in middle school. And we were getting back on the bus to leave, and he sat down, and he had some transitional objects with him to comfort him. And every child that got on the bus turned to the child and said, hey, how was your day? Do you have what you need? And they were so comforting and accommodating with him, and it made me feel happy that the work we do in elementary school, I really do think carries over to children's experiences in the middle school and high school. I think there's a direct transfer because it's not different, it's just the way it is. People are diverse.
And I think the emphasis on teaching these skills inside of these authentic learning experiences rather than as sort of a separate time of the day helps with that transfer, so they can draw upon those skills in real contexts and settings.
Do you find the kids in their reading are better able at identifying characters' emotions now that and they have the language about writing about it? He seemed happy.
It's more robust now. I believe it's much more sophisticated now that they have the vocabulary. They know what the words optimism, resilience, flexibility, perseverance, they understand what those words mean when they can write about a character. I think this character showed a growth mindset because he did this, he said that. It's much more impressive than the basic, simple emotions.
Even at the kindergarten level, speaking to read alouds and making self-to-text connections, the students are really able to generate more ideas about the feeling words because we're giving them that opportunity to become so self-aware that then they're able to identify those feelings in others. And even just the other day, they came up with words like heartbroken and disappointed and things that were very advanced for a 5-year-old.
Do you find that it's helping them too, like in terms of the wording and language? Do you see it in the classroom as opposed to a child then that is getting upset or excluded from something? Will they be verbal and say, I'm upset that you're not letting me do this, or I'd really appreciate if you'd let me work with you, as opposed to, which in any scenario, kids could just get upset or walk away or whatever. Do you find that they're engaging more to, actually speak about their feelings as a result?
We're teaching them how to use conflict resolution skills. You could, instead of getting upset or hitting somebody or yelling at them, we use words. We say to the other person, when you said this, it made me feel, and next time could you please do this instead? And then the other person listens and the other person has a chance to respond. And we try to bring them back together by talking about another topic that's unrelated to what just happened. And again, we can also encourage them to write about it in their feelings. So by expressing them using words, they're able to calm themselves down.
I had a child this morning who came in and he was very upset. He was crying, and his day had started off poorly. And the other kids went over to him instead of what they could be doing. Went over and started to talk to him and said, "What's wrong? What can we do to help you?" And one had his arm around him and said, "It's okay. Don't worry. We're gonna." He lost something. We're gonna find it. And they were very sympathetic to him and wanted to try and see if they could help him. Another kid said, "I lost something too on the bus, but the bus driver found it." So he was showing empathy. So I was quite impressed. I kind of stood back for a little while and just kind of watched what was happening. But he had a nice little group around him who really showed that they were caring.
And back to your question about literature, I don't know if you're familiar with the children's book, Leo the Late Bloomer, which is about a little lion that takes a long time to learn the things that his peers have already learned. And last year when I had another child who was nonverbal due to special needs, a child on the playground approached him, a child who's not in our class, and said aloud to the other children around, "Why doesn't he talk yet?" And one of my students said, "He's just a late bloomer." So it's just an all-encompassing persistent, pervasive throughout the day approach toward integrating social emotional skills, whether you're in reading or writing or getting ready to go on the bus, on recess, it doesn't matter. It's throughout the day, and that's really the only way in which they're going to be able to internalize and then apply it.
I also think that the parents are also sharing that their kids are coming home and talking about empathy and kindness and what it means to be respectful. I was part of the initiative of the Collaborative Fellowship. So for 2 years, I was working on having a growth mindset, and it was through reading and also through word study, but obviously it was embedded in everything that we did, and the parents would come in and tell me things that their children were saying, and the child was having a discussion with his mom, and the discussion wasn't going the way that he wanted it to go, and he turned to his mother and said, "You have a fixed mindset."
So I have a question, and I want to preface it by saying that
This work that you're doing is worthy in and of itself, without any other added benefits. But I do want to ask whether you've seen any improvement in academic performance as a result of this work. And not everything that is worthwhile is something that you can measure. So I fully recognize that, and like I said, this is worth everything just by itself. But are you able to show a correlation? Is it possible? Have you noticed anything? Even
if it's anecdotal.
That's what it is, and it's observations. Where when you started working with a child in the fall, and they kind of gave up, and then you started to give them the tools, and then they developed perseverance, and they would work through something that was harder.
And it shows in a 5-year-old who, in the beginning of the year, when he didn't make his picture the way he wanted it, he would crumble it up and throw it in the garbage. And then as the months go on, he made a mistake and just crossed it out and tried it again. So obviously that's going to transfer over to other areas of learning that may be challenging.
There's research. Carol Dweck, who wrote Mindset, she has done research that's talked about how the language that kids learn when they're toddlers and in the youngest age, if they can learn that growth mindset language, it impacts them when they're in the 4th grade and 5th grade and test taking years is when you really start to see it show up.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I was wondering if you've noticed it, even within the year in your classroom. Is it something that you can easily measure?
So
aside from the research which we've seen in that.
As an example, in our emergent storybook unit, with reading characters, facial expressions, and body gestures, our students were able to, in the book The Carrot Seed, begin reading the words in the story based on what they saw the characters doing. So through acting out the story during that center play, they talked about how the boy looks very discouraged because his brother is telling him that won't come up, the seed won't grow. So they're able to then take the sight words that they're learning mixed with the facial expressions and the characters' gestures and point to that page and say, this is what's happening here. So then they take those mixed with the reading strategies, and they're able to decode the words on that page.
Great. Yeah.
And Olga was sharing an example earlier tonight when we were all out to dinner, and about how one of her students did very well on the test because he had used this when describing on one of the essay portions, describing a character. He was able to say, this character has a growth mindset, and these are the reasons why, and that obviously is very impressive.
This is everyday conversation.
Right.
So I would like to extend my gratitude to Roaring Brook for coming tonight and presenting highlights of your program, and we know that this is just a snippet of the good work that's happening every day in your building. So thank you to Allison and Aaron and the faculty for coming tonight. And I also wanted to point out to the board, so this is our final elementary presentation. So I think we've seen themes across the district, right? We've seen project-based learning, coding, students engaged in inquiry and perseverance, creativity, collaboration, interdisciplinary connections, particularly with our workshops, leveraging our colleagues who are experts to help us guide our own practices. And then I think one of the most important things that we've seen is a common design process, K4, in the district. And it's really exciting that all these attributes are occurring, and we don't even have our maker spaces online yet. So it's going to be amazing to see what happens next year when they all come online in our elementary building. So it's really exciting. So thank you so much for presenting tonight. I didn't know if anyone had any final comments or questions before we move to the
Thank you.
facilities report.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.